Hey, it's time for Faster Masters Rowing Radio again. It's that time of the week and we are going live. Welcome to Faster Masters Rowing Radio, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to becoming a confident sculler who's respected by your peers. You can become the athlete you want to row with. I'm Rebecca Caro, and as ever, I'm joined by Marlene Royal.
Hello, Rebecca, and hello, Faster Masters. I'm very glad to be here today.
Absolutely. It's great. It's the end of April. I know that sounds so sort of self-evident, but actually I feel this has been a long month, even though there are only 30 days in it.
I know. I would agree. I would agree. It seems like it's here in North America, it's spring, but, it does seem like it started out warm and then it got cold, then it got warm, then it got cold. It was like, okay, well, we're ready to get going now. We're ready to move ahead.
Yeah, you're kind of like straining at the leash, aren't you?
Yes. I did get out on the water today, though, which was great.
So did I. My sister called me in the middle of the outing. She's very understanding. My crew just thinks it's hilarious. I was like, oh, is that Sister Ruth, they say?
Right. Yeah. They know her. She's calling frequently. Okay.
No, not really. It used to be my mum. So my mum and I used to have an arrangement that I would call her on Sunday night UK time, and that's Monday morning New Zealand time. And so quite often she would kind of, if we missed each other, sometimes she'd like call a day late, and it would be like Tuesday morning.
And you're on the water.
People were very, very generous and indulgent and were happy to support me keeping in touch with my mum.
Exactly. As long as everyone's on the same page, we're fine.
That's right. Now, to all of our live listeners, hello and very welcome to having you with us. Please, can you hit share on the feed right away so that a few more people can come join us? I can see the numbers are clocking up. We already have a thumbs up from somebody, which is very nice. And for anyone who is watching live, we'd love to hear who you are and where you're from. Just write a comment underneath the live feed that you're watching, and we'll be able to bring it up as our first off the blocks. It is Cece.
Wonderful.
She says, yay for regattas on the calendar. Fingers crossed. In fact, yeah, and Keith, who was chatting with me on Facebook Messenger, he just said, I have to go to bed early. I have my first regatta in 18 months at the weekend.
Where?
He's in the UK.
Okay.
And I know that Hammersmith Head ran. And I don't know I don't know exactly where he lives in the UK. So I don't know. Keith Bradley, if you're watching, if you haven't gone to bed, you probably have. We'd be keen to hear where the UK regattas. In fact, if anyone's watching from the UK, tell us what regattas you know are coming up. Now, Marlene and I have a little segment of the podcast which we call This Past Week, and this is where we showcase some of the things that we've been doing to advocate for masters rowing kind of more broadly. And I'm going to kick off because this past week I have gone through all of the articles that Marlene and I have written in the 2+ years since we started Faster Masters. And some of you may know that you may have seen our articles published on places like Row 2K. They've been on Neil Bergenroth's blog. They've been in one of the Australian magazines called, I've forgotten what it's called. I'll think of it in a minute. Row Trade, thank you. I was thinking, or Sport. I was going, no, that's the New Zealand one. The New Zealand one have also published them. Anyway, I did a little catalogue of all of the articles that we have. And so one of the things we'd like to offer to clubs, if your club has a newsletter for its members and you would like to have articles written by Marlene and I about a whole range of different topics, but they're all relevant to rowing in general, and some of them are a little more specific to masters rowing. So, for example, we have an article about rigging for comfort in the boat. That applies to anyone, but we have another one which is how to row and manage your schedule when you have kids. And self-evidently, that's not for younger rowers who don't yet have children. So I have been cataloguing those, And if you have a club that has a newsletter and you would like to receive these articles, please get in touch and I'll send you one a month. And you can then just copy and paste them over into your club newsletter. So as long as you credit us, we're delighted to share. And if it makes your newsletter more interesting, that's kind of cool for us too. What have you been up to, Marlene, this week?
Absolutely. Well, this week, the new issue of Rowing News magazine came out, and my article featured in that, which is the open oarlocks drill. And one of the things I write at the beginning of this article is that, coaches don't like to explain drills a lot. So they like something that really, really is self-evident. And one of the drills I think is one of the most self-regulating drills is rowing with your oarlocks open. So my article was about that this month. And, I think it's just emphasizes again that just when you think you've learned all the technical tricks, there's another little tip that you might learn that might help you do something a little bit better. And it was interesting that I recall a cover of the Head of Charles or a poster, maybe somebody in our audience will know about this, that had a picture of Harry Parker, the late Harry Parker, Harvard coach, but he was also an Olympic sculler for the US. And there was a picture of him that I remember seeing in Cambridge Boat Club. And he was racing the Head of the Charles. And this was a picture of him and his oarlock was open. And it had to be around the late 70s or early 80s. And I went back and I tried to find that and I could not find that picture. But this is one of those drills that you will learn how to control your upper body weight and how to keep your weight into the pin and work around the arc of the handles. So that was my contribution to Masters Rowing this month. So.
I love the idea of tracking down old photographs. And of course, we're so fortunate now with the web that you can do like reverse photo image lookups and things. And when you mentioned that story of Harry Parker and the photo, I was reminded of some photographs that were in the British Rowing magazine after the Fours Head of the River one year. And a photographer had been on top of a bridge and had taken some stunning shots, one of which was the women's quad, who either had just raced at the Sydney Olympics or were about to. And it was very nearly completely overhead, the shot. And in the crew, if it was the Olympic crew, and I don't know if it was, there were the two Batten sisters, Miriam and Gwyn. And then there was Gillian Lindsay and Alison Mowbray was the fourth one. And it can't have been precisely the same lineup because Gwyn was, I think, in the bow seat. And you can see that she has let go of her handle with her right hand. And there is her hand, and like the handle of the oar is like way in front of her. And it was probably just one stroke, something wasn't quite right or whatever. And the blade is out of the water. And she definitely is not holding it. And of course,
wow, that's awesome.
The photographer caught her. Now, who else is watching live? Please write in the comments where you are watching us from. So hello to Jeanette with a lovely Canadian flag. And we have someone who says hi from New York. Hello to you. I'm afraid it doesn't say what your name is, but if you put a little message again, we'll find out who you are. Very welcome. And a late night Ireland watcher.
Great.
No regattas here and nothing on the card. I'm so sad.
I know. Well, hang in there. Hang in there.
Yeah. And João da Silva Veiga from Portugal. Hello. How nice to have you with us as well.
Wonderful.
And I heard some slightly sad news. Someone from Cambridge in the UK. Hello. And again, tell us who you are. I heard some sad news about upcoming regattas for Australia. They have a date for their Masters National Championships, but apparently the regatta course, the Sydney Regatta Centre, that was the Olympic venue, has blue-green algae on the lake, and they are holding off making a commitment until, I think they said, the 6th of May. But I don't know what you can do. What does blue-green algae do to you if you...
Well, if when you have an algae bloom like that, I mean, one, it makes the water extremely thick. So that's, I mean, from a water quality point of view, I mean, it makes the water really thick. I don't know if it can actually make you ill, like if you get splashed or something like that. I don't know 100%, but I do know that if it's a really big algae bloom, the water can become very congested with it. So there could be other, I don't know if there are other health reasons. I don't know if it's toxic, but I don't know. But
in New Zealand, we have a thing called Didimo, which goes into fresh water, and it's very contagious. And so when we row in the South Island at Ruataniwha, we have to hose down our boats. You load the trailer, you take the trailer to a disinfectant point, and you have to hose everything down because they don't want it to spread into other waterways.
Yeah, so I don't know, but I hope it goes through for them. We have a lot of faster masters who are preparing for that championships.
A few more live watchers. Melissa was the person from New York. Hey, Melissa, thank you for that. And hi to Lauren from Horsehead Bay in Washington State. And that's a nice smiley picture of you. Tony Tarlow is here from Sherbrooke in, am I going to say Ontario?
No, Quebec. He's right
Quebec.
next. He's near me.
I get this wrong. You wouldn't think I was a geography graduate, would you? But we know where Casper, Wyoming is, Rich. Hello. And he said he was on the water rowing his single this morning. I was very close to an eared grebe.
What is an eared grebe? Is that a fish?
No, a grebe is a bird. It's a water bird. Let's do a quick.
Okay.
Let's look. Let's find our photo of the eared grebe. We've got one coming up for you. Here we go. Oh my! You're going to love these. Have a look at the eared grebe. There we go. Here comes the eared grebe. Look at those.
Oh wow! Beautiful.
Whoa, they have wonderful tufts on the top of their heads and around their eye. A red eye. And beautiful plumage, russet brown, sort of at the back.
That's definitely one of the wonderful points of rowing. And on my lake, I was out today, and we have a pair of loons that have appeared again. So I saw our local loons this morning.
There's a very bad political joke in the UK where an irate politician describing his opposition called them swivel-headed loons.
Oh, jeez.
At least it wasn't very rude, but it did become part of the vernacular, I think, around the time of possibly the Brexit vote. But I don't think loons are, I don't know much about loons. I haven't ever knowingly seen one, so they may not be a native British bird, certainly not New Zealand bird.
No, they're very heavy, though. So they take a loon, and a loon also has a red eye, and they're spotted on the black, and they have the cooing, like sort of a haunting loon sound, but they need, because they're so heavy, they need a lot of runway before they can take off. So
God forbid you might scull across the runway.
Right, exactly. So
is the calling, Cece, you row with loons and they've been calling, is the calling a mating call? Is this the time of year possibly?
Well, no, they do it all the time, so I don't know if it's specific to that.
Well, in the meantime, let's roll on to our sponsors. As ever, we are currently supporting the Rowing Directory. This is an attempt to make a Yellow Pages style reference of every single rowing company we can find in the world. It's on rowing.chat, and just click directory at the top of the page. And our newest listings are from Rubini Jewelers, who make a range of handcrafted jewelry, including rowing jewelry, and the Scullr GPS rowing computer, which is spelled SCULLR. And they told me in a private message that their machine was used in the Oxford-Cambridge boat race this past month to provide the GPS data for the television pictures. And those are the two most recent rowing directory entries. And we will, I'm sure, have some more coming up in recent months coming forwards. Now, Marlene, you have a question from a listener. Do you want to go get that ready while I just do the last of the live comments? While we do that, Rich says his loon was within the tip of my oars. I too saw a common loon diving yesterday morning. Honest to God, it was the birds that got me to rowing on the water this morning. So you must have known they were going to be there, Rich, and you were rewarded. God smiles on the righteous. Isn't that something that they say? And Cece says that the loons near where she rows call all year. She says they're very haunting in the quiet morning, and there have been several pairs recently. Oh, that just sounds so beautiful. Now, do you have that question ready?
I do. And this question is from Lauren, who is listening with us live right now today. And he writes, I've had a question I wanted to ask on one of your podcasts, but I've either missed listening live or my question did not fit the topic of that particular podcast. In my area, I'm sometimes rowing in a stiff breeze, 10 plus knots at times. Lauren rows out in Washington State, near Puget Sound. When I am rowing uphill into a stiff breeze, especially when the water is a bit lumpy, the boat decelerates quickly just after the release, and the overall boat speed is lower. Is it better to keep the stroke rate up and perhaps shorten the stroke a bit, or keep the stroke as long as possible and let the stroke rate fall? I think my speed is better if I keep the stroke rate up, but I wanted to pose this question to you or Rebecca. Good question.
We are with you, Lauren. We've all experienced that. So, Marlene, you head off with the answer.
Okay, well, this is what I wrote back to Lauren in an email, but we can definitely discuss it a little bit more, because I'm sure it's a situation where Lauren is not the only one who experiences this. So here I said, I would say it depends on the wind. But releasing slightly early will help you keep speed. Focus on more swing, more body swing. You can raise the rate depending on how long the interval is and what you want to accomplish. If it's a long race, or I should say here, longer interval, sometimes you need to focus on more power in the water. If you have a shorter distance, raising the rate will help you keep the boat speed up if your fitness supports it. So I think one of the things here when you're rowing into a headwind, I mean, one, you can say, okay, let's stay longer, but oftentimes that might, you might keep the blade in the water too long, which is going to decelerate you versus letting the boat run a little bit more. So one of the things is, I would advocate to release a fraction earlier and get your hands away, because you're going to pick up you're going to keep the boat accelerating as best it can versus being too long. But I do think you have to focus a lot on the drive and using your weight and getting swing. Whether you raise your rate, it depends how long you need to do it. If it's a head race and you have to say, okay, well, I'm going to try to row, there's so many different things about if it's gusty or, your speed coach won't lie to you, put it that way. So, you may have to experiment a little bit. I know this is kind of like, my answer says, well, what if are the conditions? But, if you're not strong enough, or a person isn't strong enough to raise the rate, you might be working a lot harder without maintaining your boat speed. So I don't know, what's your take on that, Rebecca?
Well, I'm going to disagree with Marlene. So everything you say about the boat speed is correct. When it comes to headwinds, I have a very firm view that you have to accept that your ratio is going to feel different. You have a wind that's pushing into your back, and that has the effect of slowing you down, self-evidently. So when I'm rowing into a headwind, my preference is actually to hold on to the finishes a tiny bit longer. And I do that by pulling up on my fingertips on the handle, so whether it's sweep or sculling, and just trying to keep the blade under the water for maybe 1 centimeter more. And that ensures that I get a concentrated finish, but also a clean release. And I accept that two things will happen in headwinds. One is you can't maintain the same rate. So if you're doing a deliberately rate limited piece, you might have to accept that you're a point lower, or two if it's really strong, but a point lower just because of the headwind. Secondly, the amount of time your blades are in the water compared with blades out of the water on the recovery is going to change. So your ratio will also change. A headwind ratio may feel more 1-to-1 than you might naturally choose if there wasn't a headwind. And I just accept that as a compromise that I have to row and live with if those are the conditions that I'm rowing in, because my rule of thumb is row to the conditions. So as Marlene says, if you are trying to achieve a particular result in this particular workout and you know you want to hit that, yes, make your compromise choice. Your choice might be to release earlier. It might be to rate a point or two higher. And that's completely fine. But you know why you're making that decision would be my suggestion.
And also, I think if you're in the context of, is this a training interval or is this a race? Because these are two different situations. Because if you're in a race situation, the task is to race the other boats. So the goal is to race the other boats and do that as efficiently as possible. Lauren does mention that he's rowing in a headwind in lumpy water. So if you're rowing in lumpy water, this is where you have to work out your release, and you don't want the wind to push you around, so to speak. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you're going to get your release and not get caught on the water. So, you have to make sure that you can hold that pressure like Rebecca was talking about, and then get that release so that you're coming up and over the peaks of the rough water. So I think when you make your release, you have to be quite specific about getting the blades up high enough and making sure that you're not kind of feathering the blades out of the water. I think that's a really important thing in the headwind, especially if you've got a little bit of chop, is getting out and getting above it so that it doesn't foul you up.
Very true. Now, I've neglected to show you my photograph this week. My photograph this week is Mamdouh Hetla, and he is from Egypt. So that's a photo of him in his single on the River Nile in Cairo, where he rows. So Mamdouh, that's what a lovely smiley photo. Now, we've got another listener comment from Dave Shackelford, who is from Baltimore Rowing Club. And he says, do you have any guidance on painting blades? Now, I am going to defer to Marlene because this was her job when she was a young student.
Yes, indeed it was. When I was a work-study student at the Boston University Boathouse for 4 years, I was in charge of painting every single blade that Boston University crew had every single season. So I painted a lot of blades. In those days, we did it by using good old masking tape, and the BU blade is cut so that it's red and white, and it's a diagonal. So what we had to do first was clean the blade. Always clean your blades very, very well. And you may or may not need a primer depending on your blade. If you order blades, at least I know from Concept 2 that they come primed, and you can actually have a base color applied when you order your blades from Concept 2. So if you have a 2-color blade, you may want to have 1 color already applied in-house in the factory. But what I used to do is, we had to clean the blade, prime it, and sand it, have it nice and clean. And then we would mask off the shaft at the end of the blade, and we would mask off the diagonal from the loom up to the tip. And you would paint 1 color. And when you paint that 1 color, then you immediately pull the masking tape off so that when the paint dries, you don't get an edge on the masking tape. So once, we'd let it set just a little bit and then pull the tape off, and then you would let that dry. So it might be a day or two, depending on the temperature, and let that dry. And then you would mask the other side, paint the other side white, and do it that way. So it depends a little bit what your design is like, how complicated it is, but you have to do, if you have 2 or 3 colors, you have to do one color at a time. And nowadays you can actually order decals. So if you have a base color, you can order very nice waterproof decals that you can have applied to your blade. So my main tip is make sure it's really clean. You have a lightly sanded surface. If you mask things off, unwrap, don't wrap too much masking tape. Okay, one wrap so that you can tear it and pull it off really easily, and do it fairly quickly so that you don't get a line of the wet paint.
Very good advice. And you can line up, if you're doing a whole set of blades, you can line them up on a trestle or a sling, separated so that they dry. And that's definitely worthwhile doing. We just did a working bee, and we had, part of the job was to sand down and get ready prepare one set of blades. I will say removing vinyl decals is a serious job of work. You need a heat gun, and they are very hard to actually get off. But having said that, there is now a company in the States, and I can't remember their name, who makes decals that wrap around the entire blade. It's not just, a logo that you peel off and stick on. So
I haven't seen those yet, but that's something worth investigating. And lining things up, using a sawhorse. Make sure also that you're doing this at a warm enough temperature, because if it's too cool out, and you have to see what your paint is calling for. If it's too cool out, your paint is going to take a long time to dry. So whether you're using spray paint, or I used to paint them by hand. We didn't use spray paint. I don't know what they do now, but
we used to use just marine grade paint.
That's what we used too.
Glenda has the Regatta Print. That's the company that does the blade wrapping. That's absolutely right, Glenda. Thank you for being my backup. Fantastic. And rolling temporarily back to the topic earlier of rowing near waterfowl, this listener is saying, especially for small boats, my tip is to run your blades along the water for a few strokes, and the sound of that warns the waterfowl to get away safely before you close in on them and stress them out. Years back, she says, we collided in an 8 with a swan on the wing and tragically broke its neck. Ooh. Remember, she says, or he, sorry, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, says, it's their river first. Since returning to the water from lockdown a few weeks back, we've enjoyed sharing the water with swans, duck, geese, moorhens, herons, and the occasional and much appreciated kingfisher. Well, thank you for that. Quick dive back to oar painting. Any recommending on the paint company? I'm a simple guy, so yellow on the back, black on the front with a simple B. Honestly, just look for marine paints. You just want something that is used to being in the water. So a Chandler's, is that what you call them in America, that supply boats?
Oh, I don't know. But
any chandlery,
any hardware store will sell a marine quality paint. It's usually an oil-based paint, but definitely if it's a marine quality, you should be absolutely fine.
You should. Good luck. And Dave, send us a photo of those beautifully black and yellow with a B on it. Excellent. Now, our topic for the week is training programs and plans. We know that a lot of people do follow a training plan, but it's not always as straightforward as that. And so we thought we'd just dive deep into this topic just for one episode and cover off a lot of the different nuances that come up with the reality of being a master's rower or a master's crew. And how do you live your life? How do you row your boat? How do you succeed in following a training program or a training plan? So let's just start with the absolute raw basics. How do you follow a plan? Marlene?
Well, the first question too is, why do you have a plan? Okay, but why you have a plan is
That's
how
my
you
next
follow
question.
A plan. Okay,
hold
all right.
on that one.
All right. So how to follow a plan? You look at it and you do what it says. No, I'm joking. to follow a plan, you need to have a structure. So roughly, have your days mapped out, or roughly the order that you like to do things in, and you sketch it out according to your months or your training phases. And a plan is based on the end result. So when you follow a plan, you're actually looking ahead at what your goal is, and you're kind of working backwards. But following a plan gives you the ability to work towards something in a systematic way. So one thing I like to say is that following a training plan is different from exercising. And when you exercise, you go out and you do perhaps whatever you feel like doing. You may do a hard workout, you may do an easy workout, but the components are not working together to move your fitness or your skills in a certain direction. And a plan is designed to move you in a certain direction in an organized fashion, so that one session builds on the next session, or 1 week builds on the next week, 1 month builds on the next week. So there's a structure to it that helps you develop your skills and your fitness and your mental skills, how you approach different aspects of your race. Now, you could be following a training plan and maybe you're not training to race. You're just training towards a goal. So the plan should help move you towards what your goal is.
Exactly. And as I said earlier, what is the plan set to achieve? So fitness might be a completely acceptable goal. You do a fitness test, you train for 6 weeks, you retest. Has your fitness changed? That is great. In fact, it's a very nice, clearly orientated plan focused on you and your particular goal of maybe returning to fitness. Now, other people race, and some people enjoy racing. And so typically for rowing, we will set a plan for an entire season, so that the idea is that you are building toward a particular peak event, which may be your Masters National Championships, it may be the Head of the Charles. You can have multiple peaks in a training year, but you can't have them too close together, because a peak event requires your plan to adjust so that your body is rested before the peak event. So typically that's called a taper, and it's challenging to have lots of tapers. By contrast, if you're a field sport like football or hockey, you have to peak every weekend. People will have a match once a week. And so you might choose to build up through the first part of the season, and then perhaps as your tournament gets to the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and so on, hopefully you're still in the match, you have to be able to peak quite regularly on a weekly cycle. So having an understanding or a discussion amongst you and your colleagues in the rowing club, what do we want to achieve? What are we trying to do this season? That's actually probably one of the first things that you need to do for your plan.
And also, I think you have to look at what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and what are the areas that you need to put special attention on in order to improve this year related to your goals. So you may decide it's fitness, you may decide you have to improve your blade work, you may decide I have to learn how to mentally approach the first part of my race, or I have to learn how to do a finishing sprint better. There can be, I have to learn how to eat properly the day before a regatta or a time trial. So, it could be, there can be lifestyle goals, there can be fitness goals, there can be technical goals. They can all be related into a plan. From a fitness point of view, at least the way I look at designing training plans, is, 1 week builds on the next week, and the workouts within a week are designed to complement each other in a way that um, takes into account your energy level, what's happening at the beginning of the week versus what's happening at the end of the week, what's happening after a rest day, or what's happening after a few days of work put together. Those are where things are put in the week is not random. It's scheduled in a certain way. Now you may have to move things around, and that happens certainly with masters rowers. And it's important to understand that there are times of the year, there are general preparation times of the year, which is more base training. There are specific preparation times of the year when you're starting to get closer to work that focuses on the event that you're preparing for. So when you're in a general training period, you've got a little bit more flexibility if you need to shift the order of the workouts around. Now, you can always shift days, but when you get into a specific phase, sometimes it's important not to change the order of the workouts. Even if you have to change the days, that's okay. Like maybe I can't do this Wednesday, but I can do this on Thursday. That's okay. But you don't want to put Saturday's workout before Thursday's workout, for example. So there are times of year when the order that the workouts build upon each other becomes more important. And that is generally as you are moving closer to your regatta time, what your preparation time is.
Now, just as a temporary pause, a reminder to our listeners that if you would like to make a donation to supporting this podcast, we would hugely appreciate it. Go to fastermastersrowing.com/podcast. There's a big red button there, and you can make a donation of $1. And it is a monthly donation, and there are various tiers, 4 different tiers of subscription, and we have some special things that we can offer you if you're supporting us. Now, let's go into a little more detail about varying the plan, how to do it and when to do it. Marlene, you've already talked about trying to stick to the sequential order, even if the days of the week don't line up. And for people who are new to listening to us, if you buy our Faster Masters Rowing program, it has 3 core sessions a week, which we advise you to do. Everyone should do the 3 core sessions. And then there are additional sessions which are optional. So do you want to talk us through how to decide to vary the plan and when it's appropriate to vary the plan?
Well, how you would vary the plan might be, for example, if you have a schedule conflict, if you don't have in the Faster Masters program, we try to keep each session about you should be able to complete it in a 60-minute session. Now, in some other training programs, you may be required to have longer sessions, so you'll need to put those perhaps on days when you have a little bit more time. But I would say vary a session if, for example, you're feeling particularly tired one day, and maybe you've got carried over fatigue from work or from home, or you didn't have really enough recovery time from the previous week before. You did something extra. Pay attention to how you feel, because quality is important. And there's no sense to basically drag your butt through a workout if you're really not able to do the workout properly. If you're tired, I would recommend, if you have the ability to shift it to the next day, move that workout to the next day and get the most out of your training time. So I think quality is important. And things are going to come up when your schedule just gets interrupted, or you have bad weather. Perhaps you can't get on the water, and there's a session that you could do on the rowing machine indoors, but it's one that you would really rather prefer to do on the water. Then perhaps wait a day and do that on the water if your schedule allows. So I think you have to look at how you feel. If you have any signs of a small injury, I take a very conservative view, and I'm going to say take the day off and let it rest. I would rather have somebody rest a day or two than push something far that it becomes a full-blown injury and they have to miss a few weeks. So, little adaptations when life gets in the way, different schedules, weather, how you feel. Those are things that it's absolutely, plans that have to be flexible, and a plan that has some ability to move things around generally works better than a plan that doesn't. So I think, be reasonable about how you feel. Sometimes maybe physically you're fine, but just mentally you're tired. And you know what? Take a break, rest. Recovery is a training category.
We do say that a lot, don't we?
Absolutely. It's important. It's, just an extra day of rest sometimes. And sometimes you need 2 days of rest. Maybe you take 1 day off a week, and sometimes it's just not enough. And you need a few more hours of sleep.
Yeah. And one of the ways of sneaking extra rest into your plan is to train one morning and then train the following evening.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 36 hours off instead of 24.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk again about when it's not okay to vary the plan. This is on the presumption that you are fit and healthy, your schedule is, you are available. And I'm principally going to make this case that you should not vary the plan when you are working up towards your peak event, particularly in the taper. So tapering is the time of the program where the workouts get shorter. The pieces that you do are typically shorter and often at higher stroke rates, sometimes with longer rests in between. So the program that I'm on at the moment, we are racing in 1 week and 1 day. So we've got 8 days before our big event. And so instead of doing 1K pieces, we're doing 300-meter pieces, we're doing 250-meter pieces, we're doing 500-meter pieces, and we're doing fewer and fewer of them. So we'll be doing maybe only 2 in the sort of 3 or 4 days before the peak event. And although you might feel that you have the capacity to do more, it's not okay to vary the plan at this stage. The reason is that part of being a peak event is you want to feel very energized, you want to be fully rested, and you want to be a bit like a racehorse at the start of the race, like pulling on the reins and raring to go. And so even though you might feel that it's bad that the training volume is reducing and that you've completed your workout in 40 minutes instead of 60 or whatever, stick with it. That is the time when it's not okay to vary the plan, on the understanding that you want to achieve a peak event. If you want to compromise your peak, be my guest. We're all adults here. You can make your own minds up.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing is, there are people, there are 2 different types of athletes. There are people who love the taper period because they love the extra rest. There are people who do not like the taper period exactly because they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not working. These are our workaholic type people. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing enough. The purpose of a taper is to restore your muscle glycogen to its full levels. So if you've been doing a pretty good quality amount of training for months, you're always carrying a little, your muscle glycogen is always slightly depleted, and you need to race at your peak, absolute 100% effort. You need your muscle glycogen to be fully restored in a peak situation. And that takes 7 to 10 days to restore that. So if you put in too much work, you're not going to bring that muscle glycogen level back up to its full level. And so what can throw havoc in this? For example, you're racing more than one race and you have to practice in more than one boat. Okay. This can be an issue a couple of days before a race. And we know that this happens sometimes that, oh, I'm racing my single, but gee, I've got to get out in the double with my doubles partner. And oh yeah, we need to take a spin in the quad. And yep, oh, the eight's got to get together because we haven't rowed together. We've got to go through some racing starts. This is where you need to be very, very careful with your energy levels if you have to practice in different boats. So, I would advocate picking and choosing, pay attention to what's your priority event. And, so these questions can be complicated to manage your energy and your time here, but you do have to be very, very careful not to increase that workload too high in a taper period. So that's one thing I think that's an issue for masters when they're rowing different boats at a regatta.
Yeah, and I have had that exact situation where I've been training in my double, and then we come to do the outing in the quad, and someone switched a workout around and they want to do the workout that you already did, or they want to move on to the next one and you haven't done the previous one. And again, this is about common sense and compromise. There isn't particularly a right answer, but it is sometimes somewhat frustrating to find that you've got out of sync with each other.
Yes, and for example, if you're a single sculler or a double sculler, and that's your priority boat for this event, you also have to pay attention to what's a priority boat, what's a boat that perhaps you're rowing to be part of the club. So don't give each event equal focus depending on what your priorities are.
That's actually a really excellent point, because you do tend to know in your heart which are the crews you enjoy the most. And yeah, focus your attention appropriately onto the crews that are more of a priority for you. But my advice would be to try and be respectful if you can with your crew members. So if you've all been training for a particular event in an 8 and, then find you get to the regatta day and there are clashes, like there are other events that are too close together, that can be a really real source of frustration and tension that perhaps we don't need.
Yes, other choices could be when you have to practice in different boats, that maybe in one boat you just do a swing paddle with some drills just as a blending exercise. Maybe in another boat you just go through your race warm-up. So you could probably assess what you need to do in a given boat, because if you row together frequently, you may not have to go through a whole hard workout if you've done work in some other boats. So those are things just to pay attention to, because every regatta will be a little bit different for you.
So, for example, if you have a quad and you split into 2 doubles, you could take a single workout and agree that you do the warm-up and the first piece in the quad, and then you put it back on the rack and split into your doubles and go and do the second piece. So it's one workout. It'll probably take you longer than an hour, but not much longer if you're just doing like 2 300-meter pieces.
Yeah, that's a great strategy, because you just want to get into the boat and get the rhythm, but you're already warmed up. You can hop in the boat and go. So that's a great strategy.
CC reminds us that rest is not a 4-letter word. That's a t-shirt slogan, I think.
Definitely.
And rolling back to some of our earlier discussion, Jeanette has done some research about the blue-green algae. She says some can produce toxins that are harmful. And she says where she rows, they have blooms every year. And some years it can shut down the rowing. So there's clearly, a little bit more about paint. Rich Weaver says for painting your blades, an acrylic enamel paint is recommended paint for oars, which if you're English, enamel is what we call gloss paint rather than matte, I believe. And an enamel paint usually is an oil-based paint and it's shiny rather than matte. So I think hopefully that will answer everybody's questions. Now, any last thoughts, Marlene, before we wrap up about training programs and training plans?
Well, yes. Sometimes we get questions from our athletes that I'm following your program, but I'm also trying to follow my club's program. And not long ago, I was talking with an athlete who was trying to follow 3 different training programs at the same time. Now, obviously, this athlete was very motivated. He wanted to really get in shape. He wanted to do well for his single. He wanted to do well for his club. But it's if you're going to combine programs, like you have a personal training program, and perhaps you have that because your club program isn't robust enough. And this is a very common issue, that your club program maybe just isn't that focused, or doesn't really include enough work to really get into shape for a regatta. So the more serious athletes will have their own plan. What my caution would be here is make sure that you don't overdo the intensity. That's where the real danger is here, that you could say, okay, I'm going to do the 2 hard workouts with my club, and then I'm going to do 2 or 3 hard workouts on my own program. And as a result, you're doing 4 or 5 really hard sessions per week without enough low intensity rowing or drill work or workouts that are important base workouts that are needed for recovery and for your technical development. So really watching the intensity, and you may have to pick and choose very carefully which if you have a choice of 2 different plans, okay, you have to choose which program you're going to zero in on those key workouts. And are those programs designed to accomplish the same thing? Are you working towards one distance regatta and your club is working towards something else? Because at certain times of the year, that might work okay if you're in a general preparation period. But if you're in a specific race period and you're training for a sprint and your club is thinking about next fall, you may be giving up a key session. You might want to choose to do a different session with your club and save that key session for your own program. So really looking at the intensity and just making sure that like more isn't always better is, designing. And if you are a faster masters on a faster masters program, when you're in the program, go to the support, send us a support ticket and ask us the question, how should I balance these 2 factors? Because we would much rather have you ask us than guess and perhaps end up, doing too much work or not enough of the right type of work.
Yeah, that is very, very sound advice. Thanks, Marlene. Now back to some listener comments. John Burley apparently always points out the kingfishers, says somebody. I think I like John Burley. He sounds awesome. And Glenda reminds us to feed your focus and starve your distraction. I think
that's great.
She follows up, she says that is on a t-shirt. Oh, cool. And some final remarks from David, who says, oh my God, spot on, your plan works. I've dropped 10 seconds over the last year, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to integrate the club's approach with the plan, because he says we're getting closer to team boats. So David, if I'm going to give you some specific advice, go to your club committee or board and ask if they would like to come on the Faster Masters program. We have a program for clubs. We will coach your coach. We will guide the entire group. And there is a past episode of this podcast where a club who has done or been doing our program over the winter came back on to explain how it went for them. And they talked about the different groups within their club. So there were people who trained somewhat more, people who trained a bit less, people who are a little more and less experienced, and how the effect that the structure of our program had on each of those different training groups. So if you'd like help with that, anybody listening, we will happily get on a call with your club board, with your committee, with your coach to answer any questions, to show you what an actual program looks like from the inside, from the club point of view, and see whether or not, you may be able to merge those 2 together, because it is challenging when you've been working hard on yourself, David, and you now want to commit and support the club, but you may find some conflicts arising.
Yes, and that does happen. And another thing, remember, you always have an option, for example, on a team workout day, because you want to row with your team and be in those boats. If you have a time, especially on a weekend, when you come in from the team boat, you can go out in your single and do a little bit of extra work in your single, and it still kind of doubles up that day. It kind of combines that session in a priority session day. So you could always opt for something like that to get out in your single and do a short session after a team boat session. That's another way to combine two different goals.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great testimonial, David. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, go faster. The plan's designed to work. It is huge.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Rich reminds us that 86% of the muscles of his human body are engaged in rowing. He said, I was laughing early one morning when I came up with the 80% of the ergs at the gym where I row are in need of maintenance. True story. So I think, Rich, you take your 86% into a lot of parts of your life.
Definitely.
Yeah, your laughing muscles are definitely part of rowing, because hey, if it's not fun, why on earth are we doing it? I think that's all we've got time for Faster Masters Rowing Radio this week. This has been Faster Masters, where having a rowing coach only makes you better. Following a program gives you a true pathway to become a confident sculler who's respected by your peers. You can become the athlete you want to row with. Do like our show, do write comments about it. You can do that on our Facebook page. You can do it via any podcast app, because you'll find us as part of the Rowing Chat Network, which is in Stitcher, it's in Spotify, it's in Apple Podcasts, it's in the Google Play Store. It's kind of all over. And I really hope that you would be kind enough to tell your friends. We would love to have more people listening to the podcast, and we're all Faster Masters here together. So till next time, it's goodbye from me.
And me, and I'll work on getting a second or two faster between today and next Thursday.
Well, you've got your work cut out. See you then.